Let's continue by looking at some more Safari tips. Say I'm going to download something. Here's downloading a demo from a software developer I like, Panic, and it's going to start the download, and you can see it appear here, and I can actually hit the X button while it was downloading and it says it stopped, and I can resume the download by hitting now the orange resume button. So it's kind of handy, and in this case it's a small download so it wasn't a big deal, but if it's a huge download and you find it's getting in the way of other things, you can pause it and go back to it later on. Now Safari has some really cool extra functionality deep down. It's for developers, and you can get to it. You can notice I have a develop menu here and a debug menu. You can go into preferences here and you go into advanced and you can bring up the develop menu and show and hide it there, and you can see that it brings about all sorts of interesting things. One interesting thing here is like user agent. You can have it send basically different identifier for what type of browser it is. So sometimes if you have like a page that says this doesn't work in this browser, you can say, well, let's imitate Internet Explorer 11 and see if it maybe loads. Now if you want the extra special debug menu here, then you're going to need to bring up Terminal. So I'm going to search for Terminal. It's just an app, and launch that, and then here is the command defaults write com.apple.safari space include internal debug menu, exactly as I have it right here. I can increase the font size there so you can see it, and then 1. And that will enable this debug menu. I already have it enabled. I believe you need to restart Safari. And there's some extra cool things in here that you can take a look at. But mostly this is for developers who want to debug what's going on with advanced scripting on their web pages. Now we talked about tabs, and there's an extra feature of tabs called pinned tabs. So we take a tab that we want to go to pretty often, so MacMost for instance, and we can choose Window and then Pin tab. And then what happens is the tab, it flies over to the left and it gets just a really small icon there rather than the large one for the rest. And the pinned icons, they kind of are pinned there, and then if you were to create a new window, so I'll close this window and create a new window, you can see there it's still there. So I can pin a bunch to the left there, and when you start up your browser they'll still be there. So it's kind of handy. For web pages themselves, you can control content on the web page by going to Safari and then Preferences and then Websites, and it will show you here websites on the right, and it has currently open websites and websites that you've previously configured with something. And you can do things like have reader mode always be on or off, have content blockers if I had any installed on or off for that site, have things like here the Flash Player. I can say Flash Player always on, off, or ask for that site. Every site is different, so you can specify things how you want different pages to be used, like PageNum. I could say, look, I want MacMost always to be 100%, or maybe there's a new site you go to and the text is always really small, so I want it to be default 125% for that site. So the key is to go to the website, go to Safari Preferences, and bring this up, and you can customize how each web page, each website acts when you go to it. And I mentioned Reader View. How does Reader View work? Well, if you go to a page, let's go back to War of 1812 as an example. Sometimes the text can be small, sometimes there's lots of stuff on the sides and everything like that. Sometimes there's advertisements, not on Wikipedia. But if you see this button here, that means it can go to Reader View. Click on that, and now you have just the text and just the main images, and it's a lot easier to read. So here I get to the text. You can see it's much bigger, much nicer, and Reader View really helps you just focus on the words. This button will appear here, and you can click that and do things like change the background, increase the font size, decrease the font size, and choose a font. And then you can always turn Reader View off like that. Very handy, especially if you read lots of news articles online. You can jump to that. And I like to use Reader View just for when I want to just read something like a Wikipedia article or a long feature from a news site or something like that. Now, this isn't a Mac tip, but it is something that you can use on any browser, any system. It's a Google tip. If instead of searching for something, like if I wanted to search for, say, Mac tips, I would get the entire web. But if I just want to search one site like MacMost, I can do site:/macmost.com, and there's no spaces in there. And this tells Google to search only this site for these keywords, and all the results here will only be from MacMost.com. So that's one of the things I use daily all the time. Another thing you might want to do is create a private browser window. Private browsing really isn't that much about security, but what it does do is it creates like a brand new browser where you're not logged into anything. So if you're logged into Google because you read Gmail, you're logged into Facebook because you're viewing Facebook, starting a new private window and then doing a search here is going to basically look like if you sat down at a brand new computer that you just bought, you haven't logged in anything, and you just do a web search on it. Also, it doesn't save anything here to like your history or anything like that. So it's really handy. You can also use it to log into one site multiple times. Like say you want to check Gmail, but you're logged in with your main account and you want to check on a secondary account. You can create a private browsing window, and it's like a separate browser on a separate computer almost. So private browsing is really useful.